Hi, everybody. My name is Ruth Hardy. I'm the executive director of an organization called Emerge Vermont, and we recruit and train women to run for public office. I live here in Middlebury, and I met Christine 7 months ago, almost exactly, when she announced that she was going to run for office. And I reached out to her campaign to ask about her and did a little research about her because I wanted to see if she was the real deal. I have not seen this movie. This is the first time I've seen it, and I'm a little still absorbing it and trying not to cry. And I also am actually really grateful that I didn't see it until now, because I've only ever known Christine and only ever known her as a woman who cares incredibly deeply about our state and wants to serve our state. And I am completely blown away right now and unprepared to say what I had thought I was going to say. But I have gotten to know Christine over the last few months, and she joined the Emerge Sisterhood, as we call it, and did our training program. We train women on how to run for office, and Christine did our boot camp, which is a weekend, 3-day weekend training on how to run for office. And I have to say, I was blown away by her at that training and what she brought to the sisterhood and how supportive she was of all the women in the room, including at that time her opponent, in fact. And so I have just been completely blown away, and now I'm even more blown away. I just want to tell you a little bit about Emerge, and then I want to turn it over to Christine and have her answer your questions, because I'm sure there are many, and to talk about all of the issues that were brought up in the film. Emerge recruits and trains women all over the country to run for office, and we're now in 26 states, and we train really, really diverse women to run for office, and it's something that we pride ourselves on. About 40% of the women we train are women of color, and I don't know the percentage of women who are transgender women, but we have, one of our graduates from our program is Danica Roan, who won a seat in the Virginia House of Delegates last November. And so we are not new to training transgender women to run for office, but Christine and Brenda Churchill, who's in the back, were the first two transgender women that we in Emerge Vermont trained. So I was really nervous about doing my homework to make sure I knew what I was doing and to make sure, as I said, that Christine was the real deal, because I wanted to make sure that what she could bring to the sisterhood and what I could offer her and what Emerge could offer her would be mutually beneficial. And it has turned out, I believe, to be very much so. And I had conversations with her at the very beginning of meeting her, and one of the reasons I'm grateful for not having seen the movie is that we talked about things like, you're new to being a woman, and I want to make sure you understand some of the things that are important for women running for office. Really basic things that many of the cisgender women in this room, we all have grown up knowing. How women greet each other, how women, what women do with their purses in public when they have to come up on stage, how women talk to each other on the phone, and for those mothers in the audience, how we start every single conversation, first about our kids, and then about ourselves. So these were some of the things that were really natural to me and natural to a lot of the women who do our program, and I knew they wouldn't necessarily be natural to Christine. And so I wanted to make sure that she understood some of these things, these sort of basic things, before she did our program, so that she could be part of the sisterhood from the beginning. So I met with her at a coffee shop in Burlington, and we talked about these things. And the thing that struck me that was so incredibly amazing was how open she was to this conversation. She was not offended. And usually I kind of hold back and don't say everything I'm thinking at first when I meet a woman who we're going to train, because I don't want her to discourage her from running for office. So the whole point is try to get women to run for office. But I knew there was a timeline here. She'd already announced she was running for office, and I sort of needed to make sure she was fully in the game. And so I kind of brought it on quickly and was just like, hey, you're new to this game, and I need you to understand these things, because if you don't, you're not going to be successful as a woman running for office. And she was really, really interested and open and amazed. And I, therefore, was really, really open and interested and amazed. And I was like, we got to get this woman into our program. So that's how we first met. And I've just been incredibly grateful from everything I've learned from Christine about how to do my job better, about how women run for office, and about transgender women. And seeing this movie and seeing her, I've met her children, but I haven't really seen them up close. And being a mom, just thinking about this is really amazing. And it was just incredible film. And I want to turn it over now to Christine Hallquist so she can answer your questions and talk about her journey. So thank you.
Thank you. So I just want to say how much I appreciate the Emerge program and Ruth. You know, I'll pick up on the story when I met Ruth. You know, I really, you know, I told Ruth I was, you know, I don't have a lifetime experience of being a woman. I had 3 years of experience, so I recognize that, you know, I don't have that full breadth of experience. And Ruth was so helpful in terms of helping me along. And one of the things I told Ruth is, you know, Ruth, I don't know how I'm going to represent a woman, but Ruth said, well, we're happy you're representing a woman. And I'm going to tell you, I love being a woman. And one of the things that's precious is, and especially with the Emerge program, is we all support each other. You know, it's just so nice. You know, it seems like whenever I do a talk or something, I come off the stage and I'm like, oh, I could have said this better. And then Ruth or somebody will say, oh, you were great. And you're like, oh, and then we hug. You know, it's so precious. You men have no idea what you're missing. And you know, even Brenda Siegel, my opponent in the race, we have become good friends. You know, it was one of these things, you know, when the national press would see us hug each other before an event, and then kind of spar at the event, and then hug each other afterwards, and then our teams would go out to a bar together and have fun with each other. So we've become good friends, so it's just so precious, the relationships we've developed. So thank you, Ruth, for everything you've done. I will tell you, I'm just going to give you a quick update, too, since the film. Pat and I were separated for 8 months, and I, you know, I hope you all can have the same loving experience that I have with Pat. We were separated for 8 months, but we kept having dinner with each other like 3 or 4 nights a week. And we couldn't see enough of each other. So finally, one of us, I don't even remember Pat or I, but we were at dinner one night and she said, why are we renting 2 places? So now we're 5-star roommates. So I should also tell you, the interesting thing about the grid is we did build that solar plant. We put lots of solar on the grid. And the northern grid now is fully saturated. So we're in this unique place where we have to actually shut, when all the wind is blowing and the sun is shining, we have to shut down the wind turbines because we don't have enough capacity. So Vermont, as of this year, as of late 2017, now understands the complexity of the grid. And the good news is we got a grant from the Department of Energy. I worked with the Vermont Energy Investment Corporation. We worked on this for about 2 years. And we developed a plan called the Solar Pathways Plan that lays out the way to get 90% by 2050. So that plan is probably the most advanced, it is the most advanced plan in the country because I've done work all across the country. It really specifies all the things that need to happen. So we're at a place now where we know how to get to where we need to go, and the legislature understands all the issues. We all understand the issues now. And we also, you know, when you talk about the privacy issues, what's wonderful is working with University of Vermont. they came up with this tool called packetized energy, which gets around all the privacy issues. The way it works for, as anybody here who, I don't know, this in the telecom area, raise your hand if you do anything with telecom. Well, you'll appreciate this. What we did is we treat energy like packets of data. So whenever we want, we need more appliances to go on, we send out a signal and the appliances say, hey, have you got capacity? And we do these things in like these kilowatt hour packets. So we don't even know which appliance is sucking up the energy or which appliance is delivering the energy. So we've completely figured out how to eliminate those privacy issues. And there's 300 of these units on the system, Vermont Electric Co-op. I left in March, but there's 300 units being tested now. So it's nice. It's nice. I can confidently say we know how to solve climate change. That's happy to say that.
See, she is the real deal.
So questions. Anybody have questions? Feel free to ask anything. I'm completely open. Yes, right over here.
Hi. First off, thank you for being here tonight. The film is remarkable and very powerful. I would love to hear a little bit more about your journey to deciding to run for office.
Yes, so the journey to run for office, my passion obviously was to solve climate change. If you go back before that movie started, I was up in Quebec City in 2004, and I listened to the Intergovernmental Climate Change Commission do their report on what carbon is doing, and I knew the grid would be the answer to this. So that was my, as you could see, I live, ate, slept grid and climate change. But November 9th of 2016 changed everything. Anybody remember what happened that day? I remember, holy cow. Woke up on November 9th and went into political depression, and I was really not a political activist. And I had never marched, but in 2017 I marched and marched. I went down to the Women's March in Washington. I went to the Climate March in Washington. I marched here in Vermont. And of course, things weren't getting any better. But I should tell you, denial, my favorite place, 2017, I was in denial. I said, oh, Vermont's a beautiful state. It welcomed me with open arms. Of course, it's going to be a cocoon. We're going to be protected from all that stuff coming out of Washington. Well, in late 2017, we started to see white supremacist activity in the state. We hadn't seen that since the early 80s. And then at January 20th, 2018, this year, and I'm giving Brenda a little grief for this, because Brenda kept telling me to run for governor. I said, I'm not going to run for governor. I like what I'm doing. So we're on the way down to the youth march, and Brenda's harassing me again about running for governor, and I was arguing. I like to argue. She just seemed to. I said, Brenda, I'm not running for governor. Never mind. I like what I'm doing. Well, I heard the youth march. I listened to these 4 young women. They called themselves Muslim Girls Making Change. They were 17-year-old high school seniors from Vermont doing slam poetry on what it was like to be Muslim in Vermont. And I cried. And that, they talked about the harassment they saw going to school in their communities. This is my Vermont. At that moment, I decided to run for governor. Because I couldn't sit back anymore. So I'm answering that higher order calling. Yes?
Thank you for that answer, and thank you for being here. First, on your renewable energy plan, you say 90% renewable energy, which is different than electricity. So I'd like to hear you talk about things beyond electricity. And also, why have you flip-flopped? Because I'm an environmental policy major, and for the last few years, I feel like I've been studying these issues. And even though grid penetration with renewables is a very real issue, sometimes policy needs to be made and then industry needs to keep up. So the fact that you have flip-flopped there is a huge point of concern for me.
Okay, let me just talk about, first of all, it is 90% all energy sources by 2050. Transportation, heating, cooling, and everything. So it's not just about the electric grid, it's about converting everything to a carbon-free source. And the reason I flip-flop, and still people do not understand the complexity of electric grid. It's an unstable system. And I was having a real hard time getting the message out. And after we built that wind farm, and I saw the division and separation that created in the state, I was having second questions about it. I think any good person who's doing problem solving is going to question themselves in the future, because you got to recognize all the issues. And I will tell you what I learned. As CEO of that co-op, we served 18 of the 25 poorest communities in the state. And I'm going to tell you, you can't solve climate change if you don't address economic justice issues. And I learned, I'll tell you what I learned when I became CEO of this co-op. I learned I had the luxury to be an environmentalist. I remember when I was traveling up that Northeast Kingdom, and I saw this home with garbage around it, and I caught myself because I quickly passed judgment. I said, those people. And then I realized, if you're living on the edge, and you got $18 in your pocket, you got 3 kids, and you've got to, buy milk or decide on medicines or take your garbage to the dump, pay $2.75. You're in a different world. And so now let me tie it back to the higher level issue. I'm going to tell you just a quick story about me growing up and where we are today, where you are today, and every one of you ought to be furious, and you ought to be rebelling. You ought to be doing everything you can to get control of your future. Because let me tell you about me growing up. I grew up in a family of 7. We didn't have a lot of money. And so, I got an associate's degree and went to work. And I paid my way through college by working, and I came out without any debt. And I worked my way up, and I studied and did all the things I needed to do to be where I am today. But you kids don't have that opportunity. If you look at the minimum wage adjusted for inflation since the late 60s, it would be $22 an hour right now. And most people had benefits back then. So take $22 an hour, that's $44,000 a year. Put in $10,000 or $15,000 in benefits, that's $50,000+ a year was the minimum wage. So, and interestingly enough, if you live in Chittenden County, in order to afford a 2-bedroom unit, you need to make $22 an hour. So what have we done? We've seen the systematic attack at the working class. We've seen the point now where people can't afford to live. So it's really hard for people who are affording to live trying to think about solving climate change when they're trying to make next day. It's not like people who don't have a lot of money don't want to solve a problem. They want to solve a problem. But the idea of them going out and buying an electric car instead of their internal combustion engine, they just don't have the money for it. So as I worked through this thing, I realized that actually gets to the higher level reason I'm running. I know if we don't address economic justice issues, we're not going to solve climate change. So naturally, I still don't see a path there yet. But I will tell you, when I left the electric co-op, we were 96% carbon free. We were offering incentives for people to move away from fossil fuel heating, cooling, and transportation. And we did it without a rate increase for 5 years. So I think we proved you can solve climate change without it costing more money. But, Vermont, we're 0.2% of the nation's population. We're the tail of the dog. We got a lot of work to do to rise up and get the rest of the nation to notice what to do with their responsibility. So I have hope. I'm running today, and I hope every single one of you gets out and votes, because, my generation screwed this up. But I still have time to fix it before I leave this planet. And I'm fixing it for you. And
Hi. I saw the film as a remarkable metaphor for something that you were discussing a couple of days ago, and that is, the prison problem. Okay, I'm a state's attorney. We jail far too many people, but our system is kind of like the old system that you had to confront as a CEO. And so the question is, there's not a whole lot of tolerance amongst many in our population to change the way of thinking, and that's a big part of what we're talking about. So I'm wondering about how it is that you could foresee where we have a system that has a number of mandatory minimum sentences that must be served in jail. We have basically 2 options. We have a jail option or a probationary or diversion option. One is very self-motivated, and we're talking about the same kind of issues of poverty where somebody's going back into the same environment that led them into trouble perhaps to begin with. and jail. How are we going to tackle that issue with regard to, we got mandatory minimums, people have certain expectations when it comes to crime and punishment, and that's all they think about is punishment.
Oh, thank you for that. Again, these are all the big problems that we all have to solve together. But I hope you're all different thinkers than my generation, because it seems like we're hell bent on revenge rather than rehabilitation. The United States has 25% of the world's population in incarceration, with 5% of the population. So in Vermont, we spend $140 million a year to incarcerate people. It costs $73,000 a year to put people in jail. And again, I want everybody to think about the systemic poverty. And I'm going to use an example of why systemic poverty exists. I'm going to talk about how we pay for education. And I'm going to say, I want to make it very clear. None of this is me running for office. This is just telling you the history. The property tax system for funding education started after World War II. The soldiers were coming home, and we wanted to create homes for these folks. And it started with Levittown out on Long Island, and we created, and our government gave these soldiers low-interest loans and down payments to help them buy houses. But they drew red lines around areas and said, these areas, we're not going to give those low-interest loans. We're not going to give that help. But these green areas, we're going to give all this help. And oh, by the way, in the green areas, the stores came in, and then employment came in, and the equity grew with the homes, and these folks were able to send their kids to college based on that equity. Meanwhile, those red line areas couldn't even afford to pay the electric bill. Those red line areas were where people of color lived. So you see the white population benefiting, people of color staying where they are. So my point being, our policies are the reason people are in poverty. And policies like providing free college to people underneath the poverty line is the way we're going to get people out of that. And and it really is up to us in order to decide what's our long-range vision for this country. And what I'm going to say is, when it comes to a living wage, Medicare for all, and ending homelessness, those aren't political issues. It's called being a civilized society. So prison goes to the same thing. I was a couple days ago, and I'm really enjoying running for office because I'm learning so much more. I spent the morning at the Northwest Correctional Facility. And the Northwest Correctional Facility up in northern Vermont houses about 240 prisoners. And they have in the prison, they have a school, high school. And those prisoners, when they go in that high school, they don't even feel like they're in prison. But we've cut back on the funding. It's not, there's other prisons in the state don't even have the opportunity for the high school. And then what happens is, and you should know that a fairly significant percentage of the population that's in prison are in there because they have mental health disorders and there's no place for them to go. So we throw them in prison. And then, of course, what happens when their term is up, they get driven into town and dropped off. And there's no place for them to live. So, yes, of course, we've got to figure out how to... If we want a bright future for all of us, we have to address the prison issues as well, and look at how we're incarcerating folks, and are we seeking revenge or are we seeking rehabilitation?